What happens when Hollywood royalty collides with late-night television in the most spectacular fashion imaginable? In just 37 seconds, one comment would ignite a firestorm that would turn a routine interview into absolute chaos. This is the story of the night Meghan Markle sat down with Bill Maher, and what should have been a friendly conversation became one of the most uncomfortable moments in talk show history. The studio audience settled into their seats, completely unaware they were about to witness television gold. Bill Maher, the veteran host known for his sharp wit and no-nonsense approach, welcomed his guest with his trademark smile. Meghan Markle walked onto the stage in a stunning designer gown, waving to the crowd as they applauded. "Welcome, welcome," Bill said, gesturing to the guest chair. "Great to have you here." Meghan sat down, crossing her legs and adjusting her dress. "Thank you for having me, Bill. I've been looking forward to this." The first few minutes seemed pleasant enough. Bill asked about her recent projects, her life in California, and her various endeavors. Meghan answered with practiced ease, smiling at all the right moments. But something was brewing beneath the surface. You could feel it in the air. "So, let's talk about your documentary series," Bill said, leaning back in his chair. "You've been very vocal about certain issues. Very, very vocal." Meghan's smile tightened, just slightly. "I think it's important to use your platform for good, don't you?" Sure, Bill nodded. "But there's using your platform, and then there's, well, let's just say some people might call it complaining." The audience let out a collective gasp. Meghan's expression changed instantly. Her eyes narrowed. "Complaining?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Is that what you think speaking truth to power is?" Bill held up his hands. "I'm just saying, you've had a pretty incredible life. Private jets, palaces, designer everything. Some folks watching at home might find it hard to relate to your struggles." "You have no idea what I've been through," Meghan shot back, her voice getting louder. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes, and you think you understand my experience?" The studio went quiet. Even the cameramen seemed to freeze. Bill tried to lighten the mood. "Look, I'm not trying to minimize anything. I'm just asking the questions that people want answered." "No," Meghan interrupted, pointing her finger at him. "You're trying to make me look bad. You're trying to diminish everything I've fought for." "I'm really not," Bill said calmly. "I'm trying to have a conversation." But Meghan wasn't having it. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, her voice dripping with contempt. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. People like you, who've never walked in my shoes, who've never faced what I've faced, sitting in judgment." Bill's expression remained neutral, but you could see the tension in his jaw. "People like me? What does that mean exactly?" "You know exactly what it means," Meghan said. "You're part of the problem, Bill. You and everyone like you who refuses to listen, who refuses to understand." The audience was completely silent now. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others leaned forward, not wanting to miss a single word. "I listen plenty," Bill replied, his voice steady. "But listening doesn't mean I have to agree with everything. That's kind of the point of having conversations." Meghan laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Conversations? Is that what you call this? You invite me here under the pretense of a friendly interview, and then you ambush me with your little comments." "I asked you about your documentary," Bill said, spreading his hands. "That's hardly an ambush." "The way you asked was condescending," Meghan snapped. "Everything about this has been condescending from the moment I sat down." Bill took a breath. "I think you might be reading into things that aren't there." "Don't tell me what I'm reading into," Meghan's voice crescendoed. "Don't you dare tell me how to interpret your words. I know exactly what you're doing." "What am I doing?" Bill asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You're trying to make me the villain," Meghan said, her hands gesturing wildly now. "You're trying to paint me as some out-of-touch celebrity who doesn't know what real problems are, but you don't get to do that. You don't have that right." Bill leaned forward. "I have the right to ask questions. That's literally my job. Your job is to tear people down, Meghan countered. Your job is to sit here and mock anyone who dares to speak up about injustice. Now hold on, Bill's voice got firmer. I've spent my entire career speaking up about injustice. I've fought for causes when it wasn't popular. So don't sit there and lecture me about speaking truth to power. Meghan stood up suddenly, surprising everyone. I don't have to sit here and take this. Take what? Bill asked, remaining seated. A different opinion? A challenging question? Your disrespect, Meghan said loudly. Your complete and utter disrespect for everything I represent. Bill stood up now too, facing her. I've been nothing but respectful. I've given you a platform to share your views. Just because I don't bow down and agree with everything doesn't make it disrespect. This is exactly why I stopped doing these kinds of interviews, Meghan said, her voice shaking with anger. Because people like you think you can say whatever you want and hide behind just asking questions. I'm not hiding behind anything, Bill said. I'm being direct with you. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're used to everyone just nodding along. The audience gasped again. This was getting intense. Meghan's face flushed. How dare you? How absolutely dare you suggest that I live in some echo chamber? I face criticism every single day. And how do you handle it? Bill asked pointedly. Better than you're handling this conversation, Meghan fired back. Bill actually smiled at that. I'm handling this fine. You're the one who's standing up and making a scene. A scene? Meghan's voice hit a new pitch. You think I'm making a scene? This is me standing up for myself. This is me refusing to be bulldozed by another talk show host who thinks he's clever. I don't think I'm clever, Bill said. I think I'm doing my job, which is to have real conversations, not scripted PR sessions. Real conversations require respect, Meghan shot back. They require both parties to engage in good faith. You're not doing that. Bill crossed his arms. I disagree. I think I'm being very fair. Fair? Meghan laughed again. That same bitter sound. You call this fair? You invite me here. You insult my work. You mock my experiences. And you call that fair? I haven't insulted anything, Bill said firmly. I've questioned things. There's a difference. Not to me there isn't, Meghan said. To me, your questions are veiled attacks. Bill uncrossed his arms and held them out. Then maybe the problem isn't with my questions. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle anyone who doesn't immediately validate everything you say. The studio went so quiet you could hear people breathing. Meghan's eyes went wide. Excuse me? You heard me, Bill said, not backing down. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be honest. You came on this show. You knew what kind of host I am. And now you're upset because I'm not treating you like you're made of glass. I don't want to be treated like I'm made of glass, Meghan said through gritted teeth. I want to be treated like a human being with valid experiences. And I'm doing that, Bill insisted. Having valid experiences doesn't mean those experiences are above discussion or examination. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I'm done with this. You're leaving? Bill asked, though he didn't sound surprised. Yes, I'm leaving, Meghan said, her voice shaking. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected on national television. You're not being disrespected, Bill said, his voice rising slightly. You're being challenged. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see that difference is pretty telling. Meghan whirled around to face him. Telling of what exactly? That maybe, just maybe, you're so used to people walking on eggshells around you that you've forgotten what normal conversation looks like, Bill said. The audience let out shocked murmurs. Some people even stood up. Meghan's hands were shaking now. You are unbelievable. You are absolutely unbelievable. Why? Because I'm not intimidated by you? Bill asked. Because I'm treating you like I'd treat any other guest. You're not treating me like any other guest, Meghan protested. You're treating me like someone who can defend their positions, Bill offered. Like someone who should be able to handle basic pushback? This isn't basic pushback, Meghan said, her voice getting louder again. This is you trying to humiliate me. Bill shook his head. If you feel humiliated, that's on you, not me. I've asked you reasonable questions about your very public statements and actions. Reasonable? Meghan nearly shouted. You called my activism complaining. I said some people might see it that way, Bill corrected. And instead of explaining why they're wrong, you've spent the last 10 minutes having a meltdown. That was it. That was the breaking point. Meghan's face went red. A meltdown? You think this is a meltdown? Let me show you a meltdown, Bill. You are a small, petty man who gets off on making his guests uncomfortable. You hide behind comedy and free speech, but really you're just a bully with a microphone. Bill's expression hardened. And you're someone who can dish it out but can't take it. You want to criticize everyone and everything, but the second someone questions you, you fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Meghan said, though her voice suggested otherwise. I'm standing up to you. By running away? Bill asked. That's your idea of standing up? I'm not running away, Meghan insisted. I'm choosing not to participate in this farce anymore. Call it whatever you want, Bill said, but you came here expecting a puff piece, and when you didn't get one, you couldn't handle it. Meghan took a step toward him, her finger pointed at his chest. You don't know anything about what I can handle. You don't know anything about me. I know what you've chosen to make public, Bill said, not backing away. And I know that when someone asks you about it, you act like it's a personal attack. Because it is a personal attack, Meghan shouted. Everything you've said tonight has been designed to make me look bad. You're doing that all by yourself, Bill said quietly. Nom, audience gasped again. Some people stood up. Others covered their mouths. Meghan stared at him, her chest heaving. I want you to know that you've just made a very big mistake. Is that a threat? Bill asked, raising his eyebrows. It's a fact, Meghan said coldly. People will hear about this. They'll hear about how you treated me. Good, Bill said simply. Let them hear. Let them watch the footage and decide for themselves who was unreasonable here. Meghan's mouth opened and closed. She seemed at a loss for words. You know what your problem is, she finally said, her voice low and dangerous. Your problem is that you're scared. You're scared of people like me who aren't afraid to speak truth. Bill laughed, a genuine laugh. Scared? Of what? Someone who storms off a talk show because they got asked about their Netflix deal? That's not what this is about, Meghan said. Then what is it about? Bill challenged. Explain it to me. Explain to everyone watching why you're so upset. Meghan looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the crew. Everyone was watching her, waiting. It's about respect, she said finally. It's about basic human decency. And you think you've shown me respect? Bill asked. You've called me petty, a bully, scared. You've accused me of attacking you when all I did was ask questions. Is that your version of decency? Meghan didn't answer. She just stared at him. Here's what I think, Bill continued. I think you came here expecting me to fawn over you, to tell you how brave you are, how inspiring you are. And when I didn't, when I treated you like an adult who can defend her positions, you couldn't handle it. You have no idea what you're talking about, Meghan said weakly. Don't I? Bill asked. Because from where I'm standing, you've proven every criticism people have about you. You can't take feedback. You can't handle disagreement. And worst of all, you think that anyone who doesn't immediately agree with you is your enemy. Meghan's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained hard. I'm leaving now. Finally, something we agree on, Bill said. Meghan turned toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the studio floor. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or sit in silence. They chose silence. But then Meghan stopped. She turned back around, her purse clutched tightly in her hand. You know what, Bill? She said, her voice carrying across the studio. I actually feel sorry for you. I feel sorry that you've become so cynical, so hardened, that you can't recognize genuine passion when you see it. You mistake conviction for entitlement. You mistake boundaries for weakness. Bill tilted his head. And you mistake criticism for persecution. You mistake accountability for attack. So I guess we both have our blind spots. At least I'm trying to make the world better, Meghan said. So am I, Bill replied. I just don't think I'm a martyr while doing it. That final comment hung in the air like smoke. Meghan's face went through several emotions at once. Shock, anger, hurt, and finally, cold fury. This interview is over, she said. It was over 5 minutes ago, Bill agreed. You just didn't want to admit it. Meghan turned on her heel and marched toward the exit. A producer stepped forward, unsure whether to stop her or let her go. She brushed past him without a word. Bill turned to face the cameras, his expression neutral. Well, that went well. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. As Meghan reached the door, she paused one final time. Without turning around, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. You'll regret this, Bill. Bill's response was immediate and calm. I doubt it. And with that, Meghan Markle walked out of the studio, the door swinging shut behind her with a decisive click. Bill stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then he looked at his audience, at the cameras, at his crew, who stood frozen in various states of shock. So, he said, a small smile playing at his lips. Anyone want to talk about healthcare? The audience erupted. Some people laughed. Some people applauded. Some people just shook their heads in disbelief. Bill returned to his desk, sat down, and shuffled his papers as if nothing unusual had just happened. We'll be right back after this break, he said to the camera, assuming our next guest actually stays for the whole interview. The show cut to commercial, but in that studio, no one moved. Everyone was processing what they'd just witnessed. A routine interview had turned into a spectacular implosion, and they'd all been there to see it. The producers rushed around, trying to figure out what to do next. Should they try to get Meghan back? Should they cut the segment entirely? Should they address what happened, or pretend it didn't? Bill made the decision for them. We're keeping it all, he told his head producer. Every second. Are you sure? The producer asked nervously. This could be a lawsuit waiting to happen. Let it wait, Bill said calmly. Everything I said was fair. Everything I asked was reasonable. If she wants to make a legal issue out of it, she's welcome to try. Back in the audience, people were buzzing with conversation. They pulled out their phones, surely already texting friends and posting on social media about what they'd just seen. Did that really just happen? One woman whispered to her friend. I can't believe she actually left, someone else said. He didn't back down at all, another person observed. And they were right. Bill hadn't backed down, hadn't apologized, hadn't tried to smooth things over. He'd stood his ground, asked his questions, and let the chips fall where they may. Meanwhile, somewhere in the building, Meghan was presumably gathering her things, calling her team, planning her response to what had just transpired. But in that studio, in that moment, Bill Maher sat at his desk, completely unfazed. The commercial break ended. The cameras came back on. Bill looked directly into the lens and said, Welcome back. Before we continue, I want to address what just happened. My job is to ask questions. My job is to have real conversations. If that makes me the bad guy in someone's story, so be it. I can live with that. He paused, letting his words sink in. Now, let's bring out someone who can actually handle a conversation. Please welcome my next guest. The audience applauded as the next guest walked out, probably more nervous than they'd ever been in their life. But Bill greeted them warmly, asked them thoughtful questions, and proved that he could be both challenging and respectful at the same time. The show went on. The night continued. But that moment, That heated exchange, that dramatic exit, would be talked about for a long time to come. It would be analyzed, debated, and replayed endlessly. Some people would say Bill was too harsh. Others would say he was perfectly fair. Some would defend Meghan's reaction. Others would criticize it. But everyone would have an opinion. And maybe that was the point all along. Not to have everyone agree, but to have everyone thinking, talking, engaging with ideas and perspectives different from their own. Bill finished his show that night like he always did, with a closing monologue and a wave to the audience. As the cameras stopped rolling and the lights dimmed, he packed up his notes and headed to his dressing room. His producer caught up with him in the hallway. That was intense. Bill shrugged. It was honest. "The internet is going crazy," the producer said, scrolling through his phone. "The internet is always going crazy," Bill replied. "That's kind of its thing." "What do you think she'll say about this?" the producer asked. Bill stopped walking and turned to face him. "Does it matter? I asked her reasonable questions. She couldn't handle it. That's the story. That's all the story there needs to be." And with that, he continued to his dressing room, leaving behind a studio still buzzing with the energy of what had just occurred. A night that started as routine had become anything but. A simple interview had turned into a masterclass in how quickly things can escalate when two strong personalities collide and neither one is willing to yield. The footage would be reviewed countless times. People would pick apart every word, every gesture, every facial expression. They'd debate who was right and who was wrong, who was reasonable and who was out of line. But in the end, the facts were simple. A host asked questions. A guest didn't like them. Things escalated. Words were exchanged. And someone walked out. It wasn't the first time a guest had left a talk show in anger, and it wouldn't be the last. But it was definitely one of the most memorable. Because it wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. It was raw, real, and completely unfiltered. Two people, two perspectives, two very different ideas about respect, criticism, and conversation. And 37 seconds that changed everything. The studio crew stood frozen, still processing what they'd just witnessed. Camera operators exchanged glances. Producers whispered urgently into their headsets. The audience sat in stunned silence, some with their phones already out, ready to share what they'd seen. In that moment, everyone understood they'd witnessed something rare in modern television. A completely unscripted, unfiltered clash between two people who refused to yield. No handlers had rushed in to smooth things over. No commercial break had been called to reset the energy. It had played out in real time, raw and uncomfortable, and utterly compelling. Bill remained at his desk, shuffling his papers with practiced calm. His face showed no regret, no second thoughts about how he'd handled the situation. To him, this was simply another day. At work. He'd asked his questions. The guest had reacted. The footage spoke for itself. One audience member leaned over to her friend. "I can't believe that just happened." "I know," her friend whispered back. "That was intense." All around them, similar conversations erupted. People comparing notes on what they'd seen, debating who was in the right, wondering what would happen next. A production assistant approached Bill's desk cautiously. Should we address this when we come back from break?" Bill looked up, his expression unchanged. "We already did. We move on." And that was exactly what he did. When the show returned from commercial, he welcomed his next guest as if the previous segment had been perfectly ordinary. No acknowledgement of the drama. No explanation or apology. Just business as usual. Because to Bill, it was usual. Not every interview exploded like this one had, but conflict wasn't foreign to him. Disagreement was part of the job. And walking away from hard conversations, that was the other person's choice, not his. The cameras kept rolling. The show continued, but everyone in that studio knew they'd witnessed something that would be talked about, analyzed, and debated long after the lights went down. 37 seconds. That's all it took. One comment that struck a nerve, one reaction that couldn't be contained, and the careful facade of a polite interview shattered completely. What remained was raw, messy, and undeniably real.